So today's topic is offering frequent low stakes and no stakes assessments. So I have a lovely little, it's not really little, it looks huge, doesn't it? Um, this is created in Canva. And towards the end, I'll share the link in the chat for you to get this. And somebody in my team will tell me how to find out who was in the Zoom room, and I can send it via email too. But this is what I use when I do best practice sessions. I really like to create one-page little handouts because it's easy for you as faculty members to have something like just one page that you can look at if that's what you like, if you like to have something in your hands that you can look at. So why should you do this? So the biggest reason, this is my own opinion, the biggest reason to do it is to reduce student anxiety and student stress around test taking. A lot of faculty members in the health sciences have required examinations that students have to take, and those things are super high anxiety. I mean, I would be freaking out if like taking one of these tests what meant whether I was going to be a nurse or not, or a PA or whatever. And so getting them used to taking quizzes, that's one way to do it, taking quizzes and making them not worth that much so that the anxiety goes down a bit. They're like, this is 5 points. This is nothing in the big scheme of things. But that to me, that's one of the biggest reasons is to help exposure therapy, right? Exposing them to the quizzing / testing environment in a very non-stress inducing way. And then another reason is it helps with recall, with information recall. The more you think about topics and things that they're supposed to be learning about, the more you think about them, the stronger you make those pathways in your brain, right? The more you use it, it sticks. Like if you learned a foreign language in the past and you're not using that foreign language, but like when you were 18, you were speaking fluent German. And now in your 40s, you're like, what? You can remember a few little words and some phrases, but that's about it because you didn't use it. So those pathways were not strengthened. Therefore, they're back somewhere in the vault. So that really helps your students with better recall. And I have a couple of examples other than quizzes in this short little workshop, and I'll go through those in a minute. Any questions on the why? Okay. So when should you do it in your class? Pretty much any time, but you want to do it in a reliable, predictable sort of way, because if it's unpredictable and you're like, oh, guess what? We're having a pop quiz. Like, even if you're let's say you're in a face-to-face class or you're in a Zoom session, you're teaching a synchronous course, and you tell your students, we're going to have a pop quiz. What's going to happen? They're going to freak out. It doesn't matter if you follow that up with, guys, it's only 5 points. No big deal. No, they're already freaking out because it's a pop quiz. So having it more on a reliable basis, such as every week, every other week, they know that they're going to have this sort of low stakes, no stakes assessment, will help your students. It'll also help you in course design too, because you're like, okay, I do this every 2 weeks or every week or whatever. The way I did this back in the day when I used to teach regular students, a business writing class, and I kind of like completely flipped how to teach business writing, but they still had to know the content from the textbook chapters. And so that's how I did it. As I told them, listen, you're going to have a quiz at the beginning of every single week, the content that you should have learned from last week. It's not going to be that big of a deal. It's not a lot of points, but it's just enough that they want to do well on it. But it's not enough to freak them out. Any questions or comments about that? about when to offer low stakes or no stakes assessments? Sorry, I didn't turn my phone off. So if you teach a flipped class, such as like the medical college, that is a really good idea. Like right at the beginning, when they come into class, when they should have already read the material, watched the videos, or whatever you wanted them to do to prepare for that interaction that you were having synchronously, whether that's face to face or via Zoom. Okay. If you're doing a flipped classroom, it's a really good idea to have a quiz at the beginning of each week because it'll hold them accountable for the material that they really should have learned. But if you make it worth too much, if there's like a line, okay? If you make these quizzes or tests too many points, then students will have a greater likelihood of getting freaked out, high anxiety. I'm going to use ChatGPT. I'm going to bring my friend in, we're going to take it together. There's a greater likelihood of them not being academically honest if their anxiety is so much that they feel like they can't do it on their own. So any questions about when? Did I already ask you that? Welcome to everyone who's popped in. I can't see who you are because I have this up on the screen, so I don't really know who's here right now. Okay. Look at us go. It's only 8 after and I'm almost at the end, but I really wanted to spend some time talking with you also. So what are some ideas for low stakes, no stakes? No stakes means it's really not worth anything. You just have them do it. It's just part of the things that they have to do for the week, but you don't make it worth credit. In Canvas, you can have assignments and activities show up as a check mark, okay, or an X. So the X means they didn't do it. The check mark means that they did do it. And if you don't know how to do that, the instructional design staff can help you in City. So one of the things I love doing when I train faculty, so if anybody here is part of or a graduate of the online teaching and course design class, I use reflections. I love reflections. They are literally a done or not done, but I ask them to tell me what they learned about in that week. So this is an end of the week thing for me, is the reflections. And I get to kind of hear how did they took in this information and what did it make them think about? And they apply it to their own teaching situation. And so for you, it might be something that, how can they apply that to their clinical situation? Or how can they apply that to the work that they're doing currently in the role that they have already in healthcare? So reflections are wonderful. They're also part of adult learning theory. If you've ever had to delve into that, that's my expertise area. Like every single theorist in adult education talks about reflection and how that really helps to solidify information in people's brains because they're rethinking about it. So they're recalling it and thinking about it, and then it's going back again. And they may think about it even more the next week. So reflections are fun. They're personal. It's also a way, if you teach fully online classes, completely asynchronous, it's a nice way to have a conversation with you and that student. I have an OTCD class going right now, and one of the students in the class, she surprised me and made an audio reflection, which I love it. I opened it up like, oh my God, she's talking to me. And so I hit play. And so she's talking to me and I'm like listening. I'm like, okay. And so I made a video for her. So I made a video response. And if she feels like it, she can respond to me again in that same grading thing. And we can continue to have a conversation if that's what we want to do. But it's a really nice way to connect with your students by doing these reflections. Hopefully I sold that because it's awesome. You can even do reflections in science courses. It doesn't have to be for courses that are more frou-frou. I'm not sure what kind of course would be frou-frou in the health sciences, but I think they're appropriate in pretty much any type of course that you teach. I've already talked about in the beginning short quizzes. And what I mean by short quizzes is like 10 questions or less related to the material that they're supposed to know already. And if you tell them, listen, every 2 weeks, we're going to have a knowledge check. And that knowledge check isn't worth that many points, but it's points that you're going to want to have. And you can call it whatever you want. I just gave knowledge check because that's what came up in my brain. But it doesn't have to be high stakes. And like I said in the beginning, if you missed that beginning part, it reduces student anxiety about test taking when the quizzes aren't worth that much. And so they don't have that freak out. They don't have like, or maybe they do, but I doubt it for something worth 5 points or 10 points in the big scheme of the course. You can also ask them to do short summaries of what they were supposed to have read. So if you have a text heavy class, you can ask them to do a summary of the chapters that they were supposed to have read or the videos they were supposed to have watched. Or if you're in a clinical situation, you can ask them to summarize what happened that week on the floor. What happened? What was good? What was bad? And you can give them these prompts. What went really well? What do you still need to work on? What surprised you? What did you learn that you didn't already know? So these are some questions that can be part of summaries, and it doesn't have to be about readings. It's kind of like a reflection, but a little bit more focused. That's what I would say is the difference between a summary and a reflection. You can use polling questions. So let's say you meet synchronously with your students via Zoom, or if you meet face-to-face with your students, you can use a polling tool like Poll Everywhere. I have a typo. I'm missing parenthesis. Sorry about that. Like Poll Everywhere, which we have a Rush license for, you can create kind of like a poll of, but it's like a knowledge check. So at the end of your class, maybe you have 4 questions for the students to answer in a group. And when you do the poll, it's anonymous, right? So there's like almost no stakes in that because you don't know who they are. You don't know who's answering what, but it'll give you an idea of what the group of the students group as a whole, what they remember, what they didn't, and what they didn't will be like, well, I need to cover this topic a little bit more because the students aren't getting it. They're not understanding. And so that's how you can use the poll synchronously through Zoom or face-to-face. You can probably use a poll in an asynchronous class. I mean, I suppose you could do that, but it's like you'd have to wait until like the week is over to be able to understand the results. And therefore, I think it takes away the opportunity to be able to like interject right away of like intervene, not intervene right away and say, okay, you're not, as a group, you guys really seem to be struggling with this particular topic. Let's spend some time next time we meet to really go over that and make sure that you understand it better. And then you can repeat the question from the previous week and repeat it and see if more students score correctly. So it's a nice gauge for you as a faculty member of where your students are, what they know, what they don't know. What do you think about that? If you want to put in the chat, like if you already do this, but I'm going to ask that question in a minute. Another tool that I like is called Socrative. It's free. It is not like, so it's not supported by Rush, but it's a free tool. They have a built-in exit ticket, and it gives you some really cool data that I don't think you get with Poll Everywhere. You'll have to look this tool up, and if you're interested, you can reach out to an instructional designer. You can reach out to me directly, and I can show you how the exit ticket works if you're interested in using it. But like it shows you data about who answered what question in what way. It's you can have it anonymous. You can have students put their names in. You can have them use fake names or whatever. But it's the same kind of thing where you can get really good information. How long did it take people to answer the questions? That type of thing. And then you can also have the students do self-assessments. So this would need to be well thought out in advance. So you have to know, okay, what were your objectives? What should the students have learned? And you can use your objectives in the questions for the self-assessment. Do you feel like you've learned blah, 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 blah? Explain to me, give me an explanation of what you think you've learned about that. Assess yourself on your ability to do whatever. What do you think your strong points are? What do you think you need to work on still? Self-assessments can be, it's a very broad category for a type of thing that you can do for your students. So self-assessments is big, and then you can make it more granular and do it in different ways. But as I said previously, if you weren't here for that, is that an instructional designer in City can help you with any of these things. You don't have to be on your own. You don't have to just try to figure it out and get frustrated with yourself and say, forget it. I don't want to do low stakes assessments because it's just frustrating me. You can have a partner. You can have somebody help you do that. There is a shift in City that Emily Rush is no longer an instructional designer, and she's instead an AI and education specialist. So we're down a designer, but we still have 4 really awesome ones that can help you. So make sure when you're designing your class, if you're going to do this probably in a spring semester, make sure they understand what you expect. Make sure they fully grasp the fact that it's a low stakes or there's no stakes involved. How you word that is up to you. It's completely personal. But the students need to understand why it's important that they do these things. Okay, because it helps them remember. It helps them be able to recall information. And it also helps you as a faculty member understand what you need to do differently. Maybe you need to cover a topic differently. Maybe you need to spend more time on something that students really struggle with. And finally, make sure you realize that what you choose has to be graded by you or not. So if you don't want to add onto your to-do list to have to grade something, okay, then you probably don't want to choose a reflection, for example. You might want to choose something a little bit different than that. Now quizzes, those are graded by Canvas. You can also do video quizzes if you want, where you have the students talk to you about what it is that they learned or didn't learn. But again, you have to open those up and you have to watch them / listen to them. So just be mindful of that as you're looking at your own workload to see what you think is feasible for you. And then finally, consider group quizzing. So I think there is a podcast on our Teaching in the City podcast on collaborative assessments. I'm almost positive. The guest is Maureen Rutherford. It was one of the first ones we did. Like, I don't even remember when it was. If somebody's here from City, they might be able to put in the chat when it's from. But anyway, she talks about doing this in one of her courses. And it would be an awesome way for students for a low stakes assessment is to have students work together on a quiz. Now, this would be, I think, this would be difficult in a fully asynchronous class. It would be really challenging to do this. But in a synchronous class with Zoom or asynchronous face-to-face class, it would be awesome. So essentially, you give them a quiz, you put some students together, probably 3. I really wouldn't go any more than 4, and have them take the quiz together. Or what Maureen did is had them take a quiz, their own quiz on the LMS Okay. They did it on through Canvas. They did their own version. And then they took the quiz together and they had the questions on paper and they were able to talk it through. And then they got a group quiz score. So how she did it is, I'm not going to explain that, but it's an idea for a low stakes assessment. All right, I am done with my spiel. Go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Angela, thanks so much for all of this. Some great ideas. I guess first I'll talk about the group quizzes. I did this thanks to Peg. She sort of helped inspire me to do individual and then group quizzes. So we had one, second one last week, and this is my second year doing it. It goes pretty well. There's some caveats in that giving quizzes in this day and age with the number of students with accommodations is actually really challenging if it's a timed quiz. And then within the group setting, it's a little nebulous on how to handle accommodations.
Yeah.
But what I found is on average, the individual quiz, the students average somewhere in the mid 80s, mid to low 80s, and it's a really
Okay.
easy quiz. So some of these questions, if you've never had my content before, you still might be able to get. Just some students don't do well. They're still maybe lost in the material. And then the average score on the group is almost always 100 or at least 99%.
Right.
So theoretically, for those students who are not getting those questions right on the individual side, they're having that discussion with some students who are maybe scoring a little higher, and there's some learning going on there. So I really do like it. Um, but certainly the challenges are there. And
Oh, yeah.
I like the idea of low stakes quizzes, but I'll say it again with respect to learning, testing accommodations, it can be really challenging. Especially if your course is synchronous, so you have to find extra time and space and
Yes.
so it can be difficult, and to pair it with the group, and you have to get them in one classroom in a reduced distraction environment, and then you have to bring them into a non-reduced distraction environment. And then some students have claimed that they're not getting their testing accommodation, even though they're in a group setting. So it's been challenging for me to do this.
Yeah.
I
That does.
really like some of your ideas with respect to anytime it could be on their own time, like the reflections and summaries and whatnot. Yeah, it might take a little more time to grade, but in the grand scheme of how much effort I've had to put into giving low stakes quizzes, from setting up classroom time to setting accommodations up and all that kind of stuff, it's probably a wash on my time.
It's probably totally. I was just thinking like it's probably about the same
Mhm.
for sure. I put in the chat the link to the document that I was using so you can pull it up and save it to your own computer. And then Peg will have to tell me how to find out the other people that were here so I can send it to them because I'm not sure. I still don't know how to do that. But anyway, any
I
other
will
questions or
share.
comments?
I
Thanks,
put the
Peg.
podcast link in the chat, by the way.
Saw that. Quizzing with classmates. Hi. LaDonna, go ahead.
Yes, so I do have for my summer course when I teach, it's a major course. I do have pre-quizzes before because I upload the PowerPoint or the lecture, and then I have them. They should read it, read through it because I don't actually lecture from the PowerPoint because it's all a waste of time. Instead, my lecture is just the objectives, going over the objectives in detail. So, but I still want them to come to the class with, some knowledge about, because it's a micro 2 class. So they need to have, so I offer them a pre-quiz and it's mandatory, but they just get credit for doing it. So it doesn't,
Ah, great.
so that helps. But as far as like some of the other things that are, what do you recommend for like buy-in or to motivate them to do it? Because I see a lot of times on my on the idea score and everything, they said, it's they say it's a lot of busy work. They call it busy work. And they're too busy for this, for, perhaps making a chart or a table, because they have to learn the organism. So we don't have a lab component to this course. So they have to do a lot of things to learn the organism other than just coming to class and hearing the lecture or me going over the objectives. So I get that a lot. Like, oh, so much work, but you have to understand there's no lab component, which would reinforce the learning normally. So what do you recommend for like buy-in, for them to motivated to do it, for them not to complain so much? Because everything is and normally I don't, like if I have them do, create a table of all this particular type of organisms and in this particular genre of, this category of parasites, for example, I'll have them do it and then they just fill it in, and then I'll go in and grade it. I'll give them credit for it, all 20 points, but then I'll go in and grade it and say, nope, that's the wrong vector, or, I actually grade it, like hardcore grade it, so that they have the right answer. But then, so it's very valuable. And so they don't have to worry about not getting credit or getting it wrong. So it's a win-win all around. But then they just like, oh, I'm so busy. How can I, so I just was looking for like just something to not, ding me on busy work,
Well,
and
yeah,
oh,
I
and
think
yeah, I try to explain to them the difference in my syllabus, there's that success for learning box. I try to say, hey, there's a difference between formative and summative assessments. So this is where that comes in, and about being self-directed learner and, doing things, outside of the classroom meeting. But other than that, so go ahead. I just want to hear your opinion about that.
Hi, Chris. So I know Peg will have something to say about this too. And so I want to give her time to be able to say something. So one of the things that I was thinking about is to do an evaluation of your class. Like
Mhm.
literally evaluate with a designer or by yourself. Like, what do I have them doing each week? Like
Mhm.
break it down, like just write it on a legal piece of paper. This is what they have to do each week, and look at it as objectively as you can and see, do they have a basis for this complaint? Maybe they do. Maybe
Okay.
there's something that you can take out, but maybe there isn't. So that would be one thing. Another thing would be asking them questions. To remind me, is this a synchronous class? So you guys meet face-to-face?
Face on campus, 100% traditional, I guess you can call it.
100% traditional. Would be
On campus.
asking them, yeah, asking them after they've done the stuff they're complaining about, what did you learn from this? I'm curious, like, what did you learn? Like after you did this chart, what did you learn from that that's valuable to help you in whatever? It's like if they can't see the value themselves, which probably some of them can't, they're looking at it like she's making me do stuff I don't want to do. But talking about the value and what different people learned might give them a little bit more motivation. It might. Peg, do you have
Okay.
anything to suggest on that?
I think a lot of your suggestions were great, Angela. And I think for me, it comes down to, especially since it's a face-to-face class, building the trust in with them as you approach each assessment so that because like Angela has mentioned, just the very mention of the word assessment makes them freak out and put up the defenses. And so what I try to do is I will turn it into a game, or I'll have them, I'll do some sort of friendly competition in the classroom. I'll do teams and work with teams in a competitive mode, sort of, just to make it more fun. And while I'm doing that, I think the key is having them reflect, okay, so doing that, I have them step out of the actual activity itself and look at the process of learning, because that's what they don't connect with. They don't connect
Yeah.
with the idea that what they're doing in the classroom is to support learning. What they're doing at home is to support learning. All of it is to support different people's different ways of contextualizing information. So even though it might not help you right now today, this particular thing, it might well help someone else. And something that I'm doing tomorrow might help you more than it helps them. But we have to be doing all of these things so that everybody can learn. And just, present that really as often as you need to, because that reminder can't hurt them ever, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
and I was also thinking, Peg, while you were talking, is some of these things maybe you have them just do together in class. And the
Yep, okay,
thing that
yeah.
you have them do online is a reflection. What did you learn during this group assignment? What, maybe somebody explained something to them, one of their partners, that it was like, whoa, I didn't know that. That didn't click with me. Wow, that's awesome. Maybe I don't know what they learned. I can't think of any examples because I don't teach healthcare, but that's an idea too, is to have the activity become something you do together.
One more
'Cause I
thing
do-
in that same vein is to give them assignments that intentionally have them pick out what's wrong. So, because they love to find things wrong, right? They love to complain, at least in my experience. They're wonderful people and blah, blah, blah. But my God, they'll complain if they can. So instead of them complaining about me and how I teach, I'll give them examples of a case study or a project work or, something that has a direct relation to their career. Because that's really what's going to pique their interest, right? If I'm going to run into this buzzsaw, I want to hear it. I want to do it at school first and not
Mhm.
out in the industry. And so when you present it that way to them, oftentimes they'll be like, oh yeah, that's true. Actually, I should probably do that.
I did that for I teach an introduction to research course. And so what we had, and it's just, all the research. And then they do what we call journal club, which we give them a journal and then to a partner, and then they have to present the purpose, the objective. Blah, blah. And so they had to do that each semester just to get them used to presenting research for their own project. So I decided last year I was going to do it a little bit differently. I went out and I found a whole bunch of bad articles that have been retracted and taken away. And because, Rush, you can get those. And then I gave them that and I said, okay, what's wrong with this study? What happened? They loved it. They said this was
Great idea.
Exactly.
way better than doing the fancy, peer reviewed, and I mean, it ranged from bad science to a bad journal to predatory journal. I mean, it ranged, and they loved it, and it was all kinds of topics. And then they love that. So I have incorporated that. So you're right. So yeah, I think so. Yeah, I just get, it's just, I guess it's a different kind of student. They're so busy because they have so much going on all around them. So then they tend to not want to do that extra thing. But you're right. I mean, it's important. But yeah, I think, and I have this case study, movies that I got from the Discovery Channel, and they love those. And I just asked 5 questions, about where, about, different things. And they love those, they're at work watching them. They love that. But anything where they have to kind of go back and look up things and they're like, ugh, but okay. So yeah, maybe before summer, I'll maybe sit down with one of you guys to, take a peek at my course and see how it goes. Because, and it's the thing is, it's every class is different. So you don't want to make, try not to make changes that may not work for the upcoming class or, but you still have to, meet your course objectives, the standards of your program, and you have to make sure they know everything. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, LaDonna. And thank you everybody who's watching. Hopefully you
I
learned
think
something.
LaDonna's the last one.
Yeah.